Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Matthews. Most of you know me already, but I am the Waiver Support Coordinator, State Office Liaison. And today I am here with Kalima and Penny. They have put together a phenomenal presentation, so I will let them explain what they're going to talk about. But before I pass it off to them, I just wanted to do a little housekeeping. As I was saying, as people were joining, we do have 5 handouts that are available to you today. So take a moment and download those for you for your use. We have the slides and then 4 resources that will be referenced throughout the presentation. If you are joining us today for in-service credit, we do have the post-assessment that will be given at the conclusion of the training. So be sure that you stay until the end to receive that information. And as always, this presentation will be recorded. The materials and the recording will be posted on the APD website next week. So you will always be able to go back and listen to the recording at your convenience. So Kalima and Penny, I'm going to pass this over to you, and I appreciate your time today, and have a great presentation.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank
And
you.
I want to go ahead.
No,
Penny.
I'm sorry. You stopped talking, so I was just gonna go on camera and just say hello, so you know what I look like. It's kind of nice to do that on these presentations, but I won't have the screen up during. So thanks so much for being here. Your interest and participation is greatly appreciated. Kalima, did you want to say something?
No, I'm ready. I think this is a great opportunity.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, welcome. We are glad you are here today for the inaugural Cultural Competence Training for Waiver Support Coordinators in Florida. You'll be able to type questions and comments into the chat section during this presentation. Kalima Mohammed will be monitoring the chat and will be answering questions throughout. Any questions we're unable to get to today, as Elizabeth said, we'll send a Q&A out and get it out to everyone participating in a follow-up email. We want to spend the next hour talking with you about providing culturally competent, person-centered services to individuals with disabilities. We don't want you to think of this as an us versus them presentation, because disability is part of all human experience. At one time or another in everyone's life, we will understand what it means to be disabled, whether it's a broken foot, hip replacement, whatever. The personal, environmental, and cultural implications related to being disabled will be real, regardless of whether the disability is temporary or permanent, and physical or neurological. Cultural competence is about how we build understanding between people, how to be respectful and open to different cultural perspectives, and how to work toward equity and opportunity. Relationship building is fundamental to cultural competence and is based on the foundations of mutual respect and the willingness to learn new things. But cultural competence isn't just a feel-good policy. It's required by the US government through the Code of Federal Regulations, as we will highlight after this brief introduction. Today we'll discuss cultural competence in general as an introduction, and we'll review related terminology. We'll also look at how culture shapes beliefs, practices, and values. And we will explore personal cultural values, biases, prejudices, and views. We will also look at the federal requirements mandating culturally competent, person-centered services. Finally, we'll assess our own cultural competency skills. At the end of this training, you should have learned how to engage in culturally diverse settings, begun to understand how to integrate cultural competencies in support planning, implementation, and evaluation, and to implement strategies for ongoing, successful intercultural communications. In addition to support planning process being led by the individual receiving services and supports, the federal code requires the process must include people chosen by the individual. It must allow the individual to make informed decisions. It must be timely and scheduled conveniently for the individual and the people chosen to attend. And the process must also reflect cultural considerations, be in plain language, and in a manner that is accessible to individuals who are limited English proficient, consistent with 42 CFR 435-905B. To better understand what that federal code means, let's take a look at the next slide. This federal code requires that the availability and accessibility of program information must be provided in plain language and in a manner that is accessible and timely to individuals who are limited English proficient by providing language services at no cost to the individual, including oral and written translation, to individuals living with disabilities by providing auxiliary aids and services at no cost to the individual, and that the individual must be informed of the availability of accessible information and language services described at a minimum through providing taglines in non-English languages indicating the availability of language services. To address the needs of the diverse I-budget waiver enrollee population, APD employs agency staff and contracts with waiver service providers that span the linguistic and cultural diversity of the population served through the Medicaid HCBS waiver. APD will provide information and resources on the website in the future to assist waiver support coordinators when a translation to the support plan is needed. We have provided a handout of terms and definitions excerpted from the National Center for Cultural Competence at Georgetown University, which you're encouraged to read on your own time. However, there are a few terms that we need to discuss to ensure we're on the same page today. If you have additional questions about these terms, please send them to us in the chat. Culture, a pattern of human behavior that includes thoughts, communications, languages, practices, beliefs, values, customs, courtesies, rituals, manners of interacting, roles, relationships, and expected behaviors of a racial, ethnic, religious, or social group. The ability to transmit the above to succeeding generations. Culture is always changing. Cultural humility is a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique. Cultural humility does not require mastery of lists of different or peculiar beliefs and behaviors supposedly pertaining to different cultures. Rather, it encourages to develop a respectful attitude toward diverse points of view. Ethnicity, how one sees oneself and how one is seen by others as part of a group on the basis of presumed ancestry and sharing of common destiny. Common threads may tie one to an ethnic group include skin color, religion, language, customs, ancestry, and occupational or regional features. In addition, persons belong to the same ethnic group share unique history, different from that of other ethnic groups. Although a combination of these features may identify an ethnic group, this is not always the case. For example, physical appearance alone does not consistently identify one as belonging to a particular ethnic group. Linguistic competence. Linguistic competence is a capacity to communicate effectively and to convey information in a manner that is easily understood by diverse audiences. APD clients include individuals with disabilities who have limited English proficiency, those who have low literacy skills or are not literate. Race. There's an array of different beliefs about the definition of race and what race means within a social, political, and biological context. Evidence from the Human Genome Project indicates that the genetic code for all human beings is 99.9% identical. More differences exist within groups or races than across groups. The Institute of Medicine's 1999 report states that all instances race is a social and cultural construct based on perceived differences in biology, physical appearance, and behavior. Before we move into cultural competence, let's discuss why diversity matters. The world grows more multicultural every day, and we enjoy the benefits of this cultural convergence. We enjoy the food, the music, the trade opportunities, and the mutual learning. The fast pace of technology allows us to thrive in a world that is increasingly growing closer and more inclusive. There are many levels of diversity. Loden's Wheel of Diversity is a tool that helps to show the factors that make us diverse and groups these into different levels. The levels are broadly categorized as primary, secondary, organizational, and cultural. The image on the screen shows two of these levels, the primary level, the inner embedded sphere, and the secondary level, or the outer sphere. The inner sphere or primary level includes age, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and physical abilities, aspects over which we have no control. The secondary level, shown here as the outer sphere, are things that we have control over that can change over time. This level is an important part of your job as a waiver support coordinator and is integral to the services that you provide. As WSCs, part of your job is to help clients change and develop over time. We do this in part by encountering diverse values, experiences, beliefs, and other forms of diversity at both levels. Are you the same person that you were 10 years ago? Think about the experiences, education, and other factors that have changed you. Now think about your clients. Are the services that you are providing your clients exposing them to a diverse set of experiences and ideas? Are we providing opportunities to pre-vocational or employment services which would change their income or work experiences? The more community integration they have, the more their personal values or beliefs may change because they are coming into contact with people who are different from them. How are we empowering our clients to make the choices that they may not even know exist, like decisions about religion, education, geographic location, relationships, appearance, political beliefs, personal values, and/or work experience? Also, consider this level of diversity as not only a way of helping your clients develop and change over time, but also as a way of connecting clients to the things that are already important to them. Ask yourself, what are you doing to help your clients enhance who they are? If they are spiritual but don't have access to a spiritual or religious activities, are you working to make that connection for those clients? When working with APD clients and their families from various ethnic, cultural, and linguistic backgrounds, best practice involves cross-cultural or cross-competence. Adapted from Dr. Paul Pedersen's multicultural competence model for counseling, there are 3 steps to help you provide culturally competent services. First, you're self-aware. This means being aware of your own beliefs and values and clarifying these when needed. We all participate in multiple cultures, ethnic, national, professional, among others. We carry our culture with us at all times, and it has an impact on how we view and relate to people from our own and other cultures. Culture helps determine our behavior. By developing and practicing a process of self-awareness and reflection, we can all learn and grow personally and professionally. If the goal of your interaction with your clients is to build a culturally competent and meaningful relationship, it begins with self-awareness of your potential biases and stereotypes. Second, you learn. Gaining cultural competence is a lifelong learning process of increasing self-awareness, developing social skills and behaviors around diversity. Although getting information on the culture and background of the client is important, it is also important to avoid overgeneralizing, stereotyping, and other culturally based assumptions. Third, your approach. This involves engaging and working with your clients, using approaches that are sensitive, receptive, and responsive to their cultural perspectives. Differences in both verbal and nonverbal communication can influence outcomes. When there are language barriers, best practices recommend using a professional interpreter, or when that is not possible, new technology can assist through the use of internet-based artificial intelligence translation services. This step goes beyond tolerance of someone's differences, which implies that one simply is willing to overlook differences. Instead, it includes recognizing and respecting diversity through your words and actions in all contexts. Being tolerant leads to indifference, not understanding, and allows the gulfs between us to remain in place. So let's take a look at the importance of effectively interacting, working, developing meaningful relationships with people of different cultural backgrounds through a quick mental exercise. Let's imagine that you're invited to a barbecue that's including all of your clients. You don't eat meat, but you're willing to go to the event. What do you wear? Does it matter who's attending? When someone asks you why you don't have meat, what do you say? Is it religious or personal preference? If you answer, how do you, or do you explain it? If everyone's dancing, do you dance? What are some cultural faux pas that could happen at this event? What if the event was breaking of the daily fast during Ramadan? Would anything be different? Do you watch for social cues before doing things you do? Or do you ask? And if you ask, who do you ask? What if the invitation was to a quinceañera? What would you do differently? This exercise helps us see how multicultural we are. In the matter of a minute, we mentally were at 3 different cultural events, and we were able to think about how we would do things differently. A good place to start toward cultural competence is to look within. Everyone experiences some thoughts and feelings about others based on many things, including race, ethnicity, accents, and other variables. When you have an immediate reaction to someone, it's often because that person reminds you of someone you have known in the past, someone you've seen on TV, or someone your best friend told you about. Your reaction may have nothing to do with the individual sitting in front of you. Many people may unconsciously generalize, thinking those people are all alike. Unconscious bias is closely related to many stereotypes. Everyone has personal biases. In reality, stereotypes are true of some people within a group and untrue of others in that same group. Those people are not all the same. Each is an individual, unique individual. Eliminating such thoughts and feelings may be impossible, but as responsible human beings, we can learn to manage our prejudices so that they do not affect the way we treat others or sway the decisions our clients are making. Recognize that having biases are a natural part of being human. It's what you do with that personal bias that matters. Biases apply to an individual's race, ethnicity, religion, language, socioeconomic class, sexual orientation, body weight, or physical presentation like clothing, tattoos, and piercings, and other factors. Managing personal bias can be a little tricky, but I found some information from a noted training and development expert, Ann Lower, on managing personal bias. Lower notes that there are 3 basic steps to help yourself manage personal bias. First, ask yourself these questions. Is this bias relevant? Does this bias help anyone, including me? Why is my brain acting like this bias is important? Where did I get this bias? Looking hard at biases can often not only make you realize they are useless, but also make them less attractive to you. Second, surround yourself by those you're biased against. Lower says that whether it's older people, people of a certain ethnicity, certain religious groups, or otherwise, if you find you are biased against them, find a way to interact with the group in a positive way. This could be as simple as going to restaurants in parts of your city you don't usually go to. You can also volunteer in social programs that allow you to work amongst people you tend to be biased towards. You could join community clubs and even watch certain movies. The goal here is to challenge your perceptions of certain groups of people and thereby create new gut reactions when you encounter those like them. Third, ask trusted friends and family to hold you accountable. Lower writes that, quote, because biases are often unconscious, we may not even realize that we have them. If you truly want to tackle your personal biases, ask friends and family to call you out when you behave in biased ways or make biased comments. It's not easy being confronted, but control your urge to be defensive. Have an open mind and thank your friend or family member for helping you on your quest to control your personal bias. Earlier, we suggested that culture shapes beliefs, practices, and values. It's important that we understand this concept to ensure that we relate to and communicate with our clients in culturally appropriate ways. Culturally competent, person-centered planning must be characterized by the ability to provide care to individuals with diverse values, beliefs, and behaviors. As a waiver support coordinator, your clients rely on you to keep their social, cultural, and linguistic needs in mind and to tailor service delivery to those needs. All of these dimensions of culture, illustrated on the slide, show how we are different from one another. It is clear that there are far more areas to misunderstand one another if we don't open our minds and our hearts. Let's have a quick mental exercise. Take a minute to view the image on the screen and think of the ways that your culture may have shaped you. Then think of a client or an acquaintance with cultural differences. How are their cultural beliefs, practices, etc., different from your own? How have you been sensitive to their needs and cultural differences through your relationship with them? Many diverse groups, including people with disabilities, people of color, and women, have had to advocate for equal treatment. But sometimes equal treatment is not enough. What's the difference between equality and equity? Equality means that each individual is given the same resources or opportunities as others. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact or individual specific resources and opportunities needed to reach an equitable outcome. In the illustration on the left, 3 individuals have unequal access to a system, in this case, the fence blocking the game. With equal support from evenly distributed tools, their access to the game still remains unequal. The equitable solution, however, allocates the exact resources that each person needs to access the game, leading to a positive outcome for all 3 individuals. Equality versus equity. As a waiver support coordinator, there will be occasions where some clients' unmet needs will require more services than others, and your ability to know the difference based on their specific disability is the first step in mastering your case management skills. These same skills will be necessary to provide culturally competent, person-centered planning, implementation, and evaluation. It would make it easier if the people wore labels so we know what to expect. But wait, can one label describe you? There is no one label that describes all characteristics of who we are. Besides, I'd get tired of wearing the same single label every day, wouldn't you? Well, there are many dangers to having a single story of an individual with disabilities. Chimamanda Adichie, a Nigerian author, can help us understand that with a few minutes of her TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story.
I'm a storyteller, and I would like to tell you a few personal stories about what I like to call the danger of the single story. I grew up on a university campus in eastern Nigeria. My mother says that I started reading at the age of 2, although I think 4 is probably close to the truth. So I was an early reader, and what I read were British and American children's books. I was also an early writer. And when I began to write at about the age of 7, stories in pencil with crayon illustrations that my poor mother was obligated to read, I wrote exactly the kinds of stories I was reading. All my characters were white and blue-eyed. They played in the snow. They ate apples. And they talked a lot about the weather, how lovely it was that the sun had come out. Now, this despite the fact that I lived in Nigeria. I had never been outside Nigeria. We didn't have snow. We ate mangoes. And we never talked about the weather because there was no need to. My characters also drank a lot of ginger beer because the characters in the British books I read drank ginger beer. Never mind that I had no idea what ginger beer was. And for many years afterwards, I would have a desperate desire to taste ginger beer. But that is another story. What this demonstrates, I think, is how impressionable and vulnerable we are in the face of a story, particularly as children. Because all I had read were books in which characters were foreign, I had become convinced that books, by their very nature, had to have foreigners in them and had to be about things with which I could not personally identify. Now, things changed when I discovered African books. There weren't many of them available, and they weren't quite as easy to find as the foreign books, but because of writers like Chinua Achebe and Kamara Laye, I went through a mental shift in my perception of literature. I realized that people like me, girls with skin the color of chocolate, whose kinky hair could not form ponytails, could also exist in literature. I started to write about things I recognized. Now, I loved those American and British books I read. They stirred my imagination. They opened up new worlds for me. But the unintended consequence was that I did not know that people like me could exist in literature. So what the discovery of African writers did for me was this. It saved me from having a single story of what books are. I come from a conventional middle-class Nigerian family. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator. And so we had, as was the norm, live-in domestic help who would often come from nearby rural villages. So the year I turned 8, we got a new houseboy. His name was Fide. The only thing my mother told us about him was that his family was very poor. My mother sent yams and rice and our old clothes to his family. And when I didn't finish my dinner, my mother would say, "Finish your food. Don't you know people like Fide's family have nothing?" So I felt enormous pity for Fide's family. Then one Saturday, we went to his village to visit. And his mother showed us a beautifully patterned basket made of dyed raffia that his brother had made. I was startled. It had not occurred to me that anybody in his family could actually make something. All I had heard about them was how poor they were, so that it had become impossible for me to see them as anything else but poor. Their poverty was my single story of them. Years later, I thought about this when I left Nigeria to go to university in the United States. I was 19. My American roommate was shocked by me. She asked where I had learned to speak English so well and was confused when I said that Nigeria happened to have English as its official language. She asked if she could listen to what she called my tribal music and was consequently very disappointed when I produced my tape of Mariah Carey. She assumed that I did not know how to use a stove. What struck me was this. She had felt sorry for me even before she saw me. Her default position toward me, as an African, was a kind of patronizing, well-meaning pity. My roommate had a single story of Africa, a single story of catastrophe. In this single story, there was no possibility of Africans being similar to her in any way, no possibility of feelings more complex than pity, no possibility of a connection as human equals. I must say that before
Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay, great. That's such a powerful video. Okay, I'm trying to click to the next. Are we on the next screen?
Yes.
Thank you. A really important concern of the effect of personal bias while interacting with persons with disabilities is that we have to presume competence. This is important because while persons with disabilities need support at times, they want to have the same opportunity to accomplish things in their lives like everybody else. Douglas Bicklin, a developmental studies professor at Syracuse University, said, quote, "The question is no longer who can be included or who can learn, but how can we achieve inclusive education? We begin by presuming competence." One of the primary things we want to ensure that you get from today's presentation is to gain skills to provide culturally competent, person-centered services. The National Autism Resource and Information Center and the Autism Self-Advocacy Network developed these 18 tips to help understand presuming competence. These tips and additional notes are included in the handouts in the resources section. Don't forget to add any questions or comments in the chat. Okay, number 1, always ask before giving assistance and let the person tell you what you may do to be helpful. Treat adults as adults. Use a typical tone of voice just as if speaking with a friend or coworker. In general, do not assume a person can't read, but don't assume they can. Speak to the person directly, not a support person or a companion. Don't assume a person who has limited or no speech cannot understand what is being said. People usually understand more than they can express. Never pretend to understand what is being said when you don't. Ask the person to tell you again what was said. Repeat what you understand. Number 7, don't try to finish a person's sentence or cut them off. Listen until they have finished talking, even if you think you might know what they might say. Number 8, you might not be able to see someone's disability. There are many disabilities that are hidden within a person. Avoid using stereotypes in your thinking. We all have different personalities and our own way of doing things. To find out what a person prefers, ask them directly. Offer compliments, but avoid giving a lot of praise when people with disabilities do typical things. Most people with disabilities want to please others as well as be supported and enjoy making a difference in someone's life. However, people pleasing may lead to the person being taken advantage of. 12, look for something that indicates a person understands. Respond to any attempt the person makes to communicate. Avoid speaking for others. Encourage the person to speak on their own behalf. If you must restate something, be careful not to change the meaning. 14, because some people like to please others, it's important to be mindful of your body language, tone of voice, and other gestures that may influence a person's decision. Provide low-key support that is almost invisible to others. Provide support in a manner that allows the individual to do as much for themselves as possible. 16, let a person make their own decisions. Don't take over and make decisions for them. It can be difficult for some to make quick decisions. Be patient and allow the person to take their time. Be aware of your body language and actions because you can influence their decisions. 17, focus on what a person can do. All people want a chance to live a typical life, just like everyone else. And finally, 18, find ways to include a person in a conversation. Do not talk about the person to others as if they're not there. Now that we've highlighted these skills to provide culturally competent services, remember to access the full list in the resources section. Let's discuss the tips for achieving successful intercultural communications. There are a number of strategies that can be used to better understand and improve intercultural communications. And while it depends on the situation and what component of culture you're dealing with, the guidelines listed below can be used to help in any cross-cultural situation to make sure your message and intention is clear and that you understand what others are saying. Technology consultant Proficient Latin America published these tips in October of 2017, and we have adapted some to apply to you and your work. Tips for achieving successful intercultural communications. Do your homework. If you know ahead of time who you will be speaking with, a client of different ethnicity or other sphere of diversity, it makes sense to research cultural norms and standards and communication methods for that particular person. Do not walk into the situation unprepared if you can avoid it. Ask questions. It might be uncomfortable for you and the person you're asking, but by showing your willingness to ask when you don't understand or when you lack the cultural knowledge necessary to avoid a cultural faux pas, you are demonstrating your willingness to learn more about a new culture and the prevailing communication norms instead of rushing through unaware. Accept that you'll make errors. Even with all the research you're going to do and the questions you're going to ask, you'll still make mistakes. Don't take it personally. Rather, Do your best to be self-aware, actively learn from your mistake, and apologize if you offend someone or cross boundaries. Mistakes will always happen. The problem begins when you don't use a mistake as an opportunity to learn to avoid the same issue in the future. Learn to avoid the same issue in the future. Avoid colloquialisms, jokes, and idioms. Humor is culture oriented, and until you have spent significant months or years learning it, jokes should be avoided as it can be easy to offend or belittle. And in professional situations, that can spell disaster. Idioms should be avoided for a different reason, and that is that they vary greatly by culture and often aren't translatable. For example, in Colombia, South America, hacemos la vaca is an idiom that's translated literally as making a cow, but refers colloquial to collect money to buy something together. The intent of the phrase is not obvious from the literal translation, and it's very similar to the American idiom have a cow, which refers to throwing a tantrum. So if you weren't with someone from Colombia who could explain this context, you might find yourself very confused. Practice actively listening and observing. Listening is a highly regarded skill. When communicating with others from another culture, it's incredibly important to actively pay attention and listen to what people are telling you. Listening can help you understand that there isn't one right way to conduct interactions. Additionally, varying viewpoints or ideas might contradict with your own, but you still need to listen respectfully. Number 6, repeat or confirm what you think was being said. It can be helpful to repeat or confirm what you believe to have been the object of the conversation. This process will help you avoid misunderstandings, especially when speaking different languages. Write it out if you have to, but make sure you align everyone's understanding before moving forward. Don't ask yes or no questions. Instead, use open-ended questions to avoid confusion. With open-ended questions, the person with whom you're interacting must explain or clearly outline their point, making it easier to understand their response and the context surrounding it. Pay attention to nonverbal communications. Communication is also extremely nonverbal. Pay attention to nonverbal cues such as intonation, eye contact, and posture. Observe how people conduct interactions with others from the same culture and follow their lead. Certain cultures avoid strong eye contact when speaking, so you'll make some highly uncomfortable if you're trying to force strong eye contact and they're not used to doing the same. Speak slowly and clearly. This will help you avoid mistakes and seeming nervous. Speaking slowly and clearly is often interpreted as being confident. Additionally, taking time to think before you speak can help you avoid communication issues and words you might regret later. Take a deep breath and enjoy it. It can be a challenge to communicate effectively with people from other cultures, and you are bound to find people with whom you can communicate more effectively and more enjoyably than others. Remember that the whole process is a lifelong lesson in empathy, understanding, and self-awareness, which can translate to vastly improved professional and personal interactions and success beyond just intercultural communications. So take a deep breath and start communicating. So here's our skills quiz. I would recommend that you get your paper and pen, and I'm just going to give you a little background about this, where we got it. The purpose of this quiz is for you to answer honestly and to score the questions on your own to establish your baseline measure and to see how you grow in cultural competence over time. You're not intended to submit this at all. This was developed by an English family physician and medical educator. His name is Dr. Mohan Kumar, who wrote an article in June 2020 called The Simple Guide to Cultural Competence. And this was one of the skills, one of the quizzes that he included to help people gauge their current status and to encourage improvement. We're providing it again to help you identify your strengths and weaknesses, using the scoring to help you in your journey. So we'll ask the first question. Do you listen attentively to other people? Do you encourage others to express their opinions? Do you look at information from different sources? Do you critically analyze information before decision making? When you explain your choices and thoughts, do you often or offer clear arguments? Can you identify problems to be solved in a systematic way? Do you explore new things in situations? Do you often reflect on your needs, goals, and motivations? Again, while we won't take time for the scoring now, we encourage you to get the document from the resource section and to score your points. And then this page within the scoring document explains the scores. So let's go to our final slide. You only need to turn on the news to see that we as a country still have a lot of work to do toward understanding and embracing cultural diversity. Whatever one's views are about immigration, borders, political divides, cultural isolation is not a solution. Cross-cultural transactions enrich, energize, enlighten, enthuse, and empower people. A person may start anywhere in the cultural competence continuum seen on the screen, based on their beliefs, values, cultural attitudes, prior learning, upbringing, prior exposure to diverse backgrounds. In this graphic, stages of cultural competence developed by Dr. Cross and his team at Georgetown University in 1989, at the extreme left of the continuum is cultural destructiveness, where bias, intolerance, and racism exist. Many of us may exist in the zones of cultural incapacity, cultural blindness, or cultural pre-competence. Moving up on the cultural competence continuum requires self-awareness, lifelong learning, and approaching others with respect and humility. But you're already on the right track by taking this course and asking yourself these questions. The next step is to actively work to overcome biases or stereotypes. We all have to monitor ourselves in how we work with and communicate with APD clients, or how we communicate with anyone for that matter. We have to actively seek out ways to become culturally competent by being self-aware, learning about your client's culture, and approaching your client with sensitivity and humility. Thank you for your time today. We'll have questions and answers, and I just want to wish you a blue sky day.
Thank you, Penny. That was a great presentation. We do have about 6 minutes, maybe even a little bit more since we got started a couple minutes late. So we would like to take this time for you all to utilize the chat box. Feel free to send us questions if there's anything that Penny spoke about that you want expansion. She has some time that she could address those things. Also, we've gotten some feedback about the topic just being a really good topic and wanting more trainings. So I am reading those, I'm seeing those, and I am keeping that in mind as I come up with the schedule for this year. So yeah, go ahead, send things in. All three of us are here to answer questions, and we will either answer them by typing and sending a message back to you, or we'll read it out loud so everyone can hear and hopefully gain something from that question.
I'd also
But
like to
Oh,
suggest
sorry.
you're welcome to reach out to Kalima and I. Our emails on the screen if you want to reach out to us later.
I appreciate everyone's positive feedback. I was really excited that we were able to get this topic on the calendar. I was hoping that that you all agreed, and I guess I've gotten that validation. Penny, we're getting lots of thank yous, great discussions, useful training. So I'd say that you really hit the nail on the head with this one.
And
I'm
Elizabeth,
so pleased.
there's a question regarding getting credit for the class.
I see it. It's
Okay.
at 11 o'clock. I'll let everyone know how to get
Okay.
that assessment.
Great deal.
Mhm.
And great job, Penny.
Thanks.
You know, there was a lot of research that went into developing this presentation because there was nothing like this that spoke specifically to the clients that we serve. And it's very validating to see the positive comments that you guys are sending.
Yes,
So
it
thank
is.
you.
And I will say, I know that you all are very savvy with finding your own research and knowing what else is out there. So as you're looking for certain things, if you find something that you think is very credible and useful, you are more than welcome to send it to Kalima and Penny and even myself. And we will keep that in the bank of knowledge, because like Kalima was saying, you know, we really do look far and wide for resources, but sometimes we'll miss something. And it's great when I receive things from you all because I know that you found it useful. I know that you think that it is a valuable resource. So while you're out there doing your own research, feel free to share anything with us in the future. Okay, so I am going to take the screen control back from Penny and get set up for all of the post-assessment questions. I just wanted to say again, thank you to Penny and Kalima and all of their hard work that went into putting this presentation together. So I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your time. And I really, really think that this was a very positive presentation.